everybody who's tuning in or who's watching later. We'll give it just a few minutes, so if anybody wants to join in, they can join in and send messages. One of the hardest things to do is, for me, I usually can talk to people and groups of people really easily in person. One of the hardest things to do is I don't know if you've ever done live before, but if you're looking at yourself while you're talking. So to me, it's a little uncomfortable. So it's been a bit of a challenge since I started this, because essentially I'm talking to myself at this point, and I'm actually watching myself. Whereas normally, if I'm in a group of people, I can look at different people. It makes it a lot easier for me. So there's one of the things that we learn as we go through and learning to talk with people is that if you want them to keep talking, you just sit quietly and stare at them. And just eventually human nature kicks in, and what they want to do is start talking. So now not only am I doing what I do each time, but I'm also staring at myself, and if I stop, I start thinking I need to talk. And so sometimes I ramble, so I apologize for that, and I'll try to keep that to a minimum as possible. But as we begin tonight we're going to be talking about Matthew 5, and Matthew 5 is probably one of my favorite chapters, one of the favorite chapters in the Bible, and it's the Sermon on the Mount. There's a lot of great story. It's written. I love the way it's written in the Bible, and we'll be reading out of the New International Version tonight. So it's one of those things I really enjoy. It's a little bit longer, so we may go a little bit longer than normal on this one. But I'll try to talk, if anything comes up as we go through, I'll try to address it as I'm going through it rather than waiting all till the end. So we're going to start with the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, verse 1. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." One of the things that Mel and I have been doing is working with Voice of the Martyrs, and we go out and speak on behalf of the persecuted church around the world. And that's one of the biggest things here is that we need to realize that through witness you can become persecuted. It's kind of anticipated. The Bible basically tells us this is what's going to happen. Once you start speaking the gospel to anybody, you have this chance. And here in the United States, we're pretty lucky as far as that goes. Most of our persecution comes in the form of losing friends or family, stuff like that as we go through. But other parts of the world, the people are losing their lives, they're losing their homes, they're losing their jobs, they're losing so much more than what we experience here in the West. And that's something that we really need to focus on and be sure and pray for them, because one of the main things they ask for is prayer, not to leave or to be relieved of the persecution, but to be able to persevere and to continue what they're doing. So we're going to continue with verse 13. "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." At this point, this verse kind of spoke to me on the fact that what we need to be is that light, the light into the darkness of this world. And as we go out and shine and let the light, it's not so much, what you say or what you do, it's how you live your life that determines if people are interested in the faith. If you say you're a Christian and you go out and do things that are obviously wrong or obviously contrary to the gospel, then people see that and they note that and they think, well, that guy's a Christian, but he's doing everything opposite. And that's where the hypocrite gets thrown around a lot. So one thing we need to watch is as we go out, we live in a glass bowl, and as we go out and shine the light, people are watching us and people are seeing what we're doing. And a lot of what we do is as much of a testimony as any words we may speak. So we got to be careful, and we got to watch that as we go through life. We're not perfect. We're all going to make mistakes all the time, but don't. Our goal is to try to be as Christ-like as possible. Our goal is to follow Christ as He was. So we need to do our best. But if we do fail, it's important for us to point out that, yeah, we messed up. We're still human, but we're trying, and to be the best we can be to the people out there, and to show the love of Christ in everything we do. So even though we may fail, as long as we're trying and we're doing and we're repenting, we're turning away from whatever sins or whatever failure we're doing at that point, that's what's important, and that's something that we need to remember as we go through our life, because we are going to fall. There's going to be those times, and that can be tough. And sometimes, as you can see with some of the mega pastors have had this. They get large, and then all of a sudden something comes out, or they do something wrong. Well, it's a big fall for them, and it's something that we got to keep them in our prayers, because they are still human. And though we want our pastors and our leaders and anybody in the faith to be as perfect as possible, we are still human, and sometimes we're going to fail. As we go into verse 17, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Verse 18 says, and I have this highlighted because at one point this really explained a lot to me. It says, for truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. And one of my questions I had at this time, and hopefully some of my pastor friends and other people who are far more learned than I am, and I'm by no means a theologian or anywhere near that, but to me it said that the law still applied until everything had been accomplished, which is the resurrection of Christ, and then it takes us into the new covenant. I don't know that that's right. I'll ask them when I get there, but if anybody knows more specifically about that specific verse, please feel free to let me know. Verse 19 goes on to say, therefore anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. You have heard that it is said to the people long ago, you shall not murder. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother Raka, or sister Raka, which is a Aramaic term for contempt, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says you fool will be in danger of the fires of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister have something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar first. Go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown in prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid every last penny. And that's, if we as Christians work together to resolve our issues rather than taking them outside, if we could sit down as men and women and brothers and sisters and air out any grievances that we may have with one another in the safety of a church or a group, because the group is the church, the people are the church, the buildings are secondary to Christ's church. But if we could start doing that as Christians, is sitting down together and working through these things, going through all the problems that we may have with one another or with anybody else, we could resolve all this before it got out of hand and before it got to levels that can be significant and cause problems, and then could eventually become an embarrassment. One of the things I noticed years ago was talking about murder a few minutes ago. Growing up, I'd always seen the 10 Commandments as thou shalt not kill. And that always concerned me, because at the time I wanted to go into the military. I'm thinking, well, what if you have to kill? And then come to find out, and I'm sure most everyone knows this by now, but it took me a while before I learned it, but it was a mistranslation of the word, and the word is actually murder, is to kill someone without reason or not justifiable, whereas kill was, biblically speaking, there were battles and people were killed in the Bible. So that's one point to make, and it was often relayed, especially back when I was younger, that it was thou shalt not kill, but it's actually, once you go back, it's the correct term is murder. Verse 27, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away, for it is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go to hell. It has been said that anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. And that's relating back to Old Testament in Deuteronomy 24:1. But Jesus says, I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her a victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. That's to be said that obviously Jesus doesn't want a woman to be in a situation where she's getting beat or physically abused. There are causes for divorce, and we know Jesus wants you to be safe, but it's not to be open and just to get a divorce on a whim or just because you're tired. It's something you got to work at and learn from each other, and it's not 50-50, it's 100-100 for both parties. And that's one of the things that if we work more on our marriages rather than using them as conveniences or as an easy out of a divorce, that's what we're trying to stay away from, and that's what we don't want, because marriage should be forever. And I know there's a lot of people that have had divorces, and there's a lot of reasons for them. But it's the ultimate goal is to be like my parents and my grandparents. They've been married forever. And my great-grandparents, I had a long history of family that stayed together through everything, and they've dealt with a lot. But once you point to the fact of a marriage is a lifetime commitment, and if God puts you together, that's what it's supposed to be. And especially if you're coming in as believers into a marriage, you got to stick it out. And I have some great examples in my family. I've also been divorced before. So before I really gave my life to the Lord, I like I said, I wasn't perfect. But ever since I've given my life, that's my goal is regardless if me and my wife argue at all, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're coming back together, and we're going to work through everything. And that's what we really got to focus on our Christian marriage is working together and putting God first in your marriage. And once you have God first, and everything else falls into place. So as we go on to Matthew 5, verse 33, again, you have heard it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot even make one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go to 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. And I think a lot of that, if we really looked at it and we focused on, there's people hurt us all the time. I mean, it's almost a daily process that someone will say something, or you'll go through an experience and you're trying to deal with it, and it's hard, and you want to lash out at that person, or you want to take retribution. But one of the main focuses through the entire New Testament is love, and if we try to restrain ourselves from that, and we try to keep back those feelings and those anger and the stuff that's building up inside of us, and try to work towards peace in any way you can, that's one of the main things we really want to focus on. So that's where we're kind of pointing is on that I feel anyways. Matthew 5:43, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And I think that's where it comes down to is our goal is to be as perfect as God. That's the ultimate goal. Now, most of us will never get there. I know no matter how hard I try, I'm still human, and I still have my faults, and I still have my errors. I still worry about stuff, even though the Bible clearly says, don't worry, put your cares onto God, and He'll take care of you. But I still work. And it's something that I've got to work through in my own self, and it's stuff that I see, but my goal is to try to be the same as Christ and try to work as close as I can to be in Him. I'll never be that perfect, but my goal is to try. And sometimes we may slide, and sometimes we may fall, but the important thing is to return from our sin, repent for our sins, and keep moving forward, because as long as we keep going forward, it's real easy. It's like going to the gym. I can go to the gym every day and work out, but I miss 1 or 2 days. It's really easy not to go back. And it's the same thing in your walk with Christ. If you turn away for a while, it's even harder to go back, and it's really easy to stay out of it. Whereas if you try to focus and just spend a few minutes a day in the Word, and that's what we're trying to do here is just try to have a few minutes in the Word every day and a little conversation about that. And that's the end of Matthew 5. We're going to have some other pastors come in too periodically and join us on these. I've talked to Pastor Steve Talbert. He's coming soon. We're going to sit down and we'll actually be broadcasting both to you all and to his church as well. The idea is to get more people so you don't have to look at just me all the time. But we can have a more in-depth conversation with people. We can talk about stuff. We can go deeper into the Word when there's one or more of us sitting here and talking about it. So we have a lot of stuff coming up. We'll reach out to other pastors in the community who want to. Anybody else who wants to is more than welcome to come sit. And even if you're not a pastor, if you want to sit with us and talk for a few minutes about the Bible, we're just going to work our way through from Matthew 1 till the end of Revelation. We're going to start in the New Testament, and we'll see how that goes, and maybe we'll go into the Old Testament. But that's kind of where we're going. I don't have dates on when they're going to join, but we'll try to get with everybody and see when would be perfect or when would fit with their schedules, because I know they're busy. They have their own churches to run, so anything to do with that is just be helping us out, and I really do appreciate them for taking the time and offering to do that. So hopefully in the next few days, weeks, we'll have some more people. We'll have a group, and we'll sit together, and we'll still spend a few minutes in the Word and maybe go a little deeper than we normally do. But that's it for tonight. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. Everybody have a good night.